Thank you very much for giving us this valuable lecture. I would like to say that in the majority of the common law jurisdictions, if you die without will, you have to pay, your family has to pay taxes on probate. Does that apply here in Qatar?
If there are taxes imposed by your own system or any jurisdiction, remember what I said is that probably the court will ask you to go back home and get a court decision to be enforced in Qatar on how your will be or your estates will be devised, which means when you go back home, you will have to pay the taxes if it's required. The government, the state of Qatar will not collect tax on behalf of another nation unless there is an agreement between them. In Qatar, we don't have a tax system, a complicated tax system, and for sure wills are not required, and there are no tax on your estates if somebody passes away.
I would like to say that because I am a Muslim as well. I understand that the court here automatically will apply Muslim law to my state. But the jurisdiction where I am coming from, my family has to pay taxes on my state.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you are a Muslim or non-Muslim. The law does not distinguish between Muslim or non-Muslims. It basically created a distinction between Qatari nationals and non-Qatari nationals. So, which means that even Muslims from Arab countries or from the Western world, their home country laws will apply. So, if there are taxes imposed by your own system prevails on Qatar. Now, if your question is related to our court, if they are going to apply your home country laws, they are obliged to. If they did not do that, anyone can challenge the decision. It can be invalidated. Somebody can go back home to your home country and get a decision that is different than the local court decision and come and enforce it.
Okay, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I just had a question about leaving assets to minors. In the example you gave earlier of the sad circumstances of two parents dying, leaving two very young children, what would your advice be in terms of leaving the assets? For example, in the UK, we would typically leave them on trust for them to be administered for the benefit of the children.
Well, you can do the same, but to basically implement it, it will help you if you have a will, creating that. It doesn't have to be based on Qatar laws. It needs to be based on your home country laws. As long as it's legally enforceable back home, our court does not have jurisdiction to decide whether it's valid or not. As long as there is a decision from your own court, or the laws are clear enough to basically enforce it.
If we were just simply, because we don't have many assets in Qatar, if we were simply just to leave the assets to the grandparents, would that be, and that was in a legally binding English will, that would be recognised in Qatar?
Remember, as I said at the beginning, Islamic principle does not apply to you. As long as your home country laws allow you to devise your will the way you want, you can do whatever you want. Even if you leave it to a third party who is not even a relative. As long as it's permissible under your own laws, you can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Faisal Kohaji, legal counsel from MOQ. I have one comment and one question. I have a question regarding that. We know from your presentation that the applicable law will be for the situation of experts. It's the law of their nationalities. What about if the law of their nationalities it's a conflict of laws issues? Guide us to apply the Qatari law. So which law will be applicable? Because we will enter into circle that the Qatari law will said that the applicable law is the law of the nationality, while the nationality law it said that the Qatari law will be applied. They didn't specify the Qatari, but the place of death. Just a comment regarding the family law. The family law allows the implementation of the Qatari law upon whether Muslims or non-Muslims if they want to. And if the parties, or let's say in the situation of wills, the death party is a Muslim, the normal situation based on Article 4 from the family law, the Qatari law will be applied unless that expressly they said that they don't want the Qatari law to be applied.
Thank you, Faisal. Your comment is very valuable. Going back to your question, if I understood it correct, what you are trying to say is if the home country laws say the place of death laws will apply and Qatari law is not applicable. In this situation, remember we have rules at the civil code regarding conflict of laws. Now, a Qatari court can always elect to not proceed with the claim if the deceased is non-local, because based on our laws, they don't have jurisdiction. And if they elected to go forward with it, again, the court can elect to go forward with it if they wanted. If they elected to go forward with it, the question would be, what happens if somebody challenged the decision? Now, I don't have a straight answer to your question, Faisal, on what will happen on that instance. And I invite any of the lawyers who are attending here if he wants to comment on that. But again, local laws, the local court is basically only forced to apply local laws, and they don't have to have any consideration to other than that. I think Dr. Zain has a comment on this regard, right?
Mr. Salman, thank you very much for this informative presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Zain Shara, and I'm a senior legal advisor at Qatar International Court and Dispute Resolution Center. I have a comment, and also I would like to answer Faisal's question. My comment is, as you can see, the majority of the audience are expatriates, and I'm one of them who got a dual citizenship. Don't you think it's a good idea for the State of Qatar to accede to the 1973 Washington Convention on the recognition of the form of international wills? Secondly, my answer to Faisal's questions, the Qatari courts, of course, will apply the laws of the deceased apart from the conflict of law rules. And I'm sure in every country you would find legislation that deals with wills and inheritance.
Thank you, Dr. Zain, and thank you for the clarification. I think if the convention is the solution for this issue, I would think the State of Qatar will not hesitate. However, what I believe, actually, I did not expect nor thought that talking about wills has any interest to people. When I was first asked to talk about it, it wasn't in this session, it was a different session. And I saw the turnout of the people. I was surprised. And I think the Tuesday Ladies group was the first one who started talking to me about it. Then the second time I spoke about it was at Education City. And I was surprised with the interest that I've seen from people. And then actually Ziad proposed that we should talk about wills in this workshop. The issue with the government, remember, we are a developing country. There are lots of laws, legislations are being processed, amended, and I think you know one of which is the arbitration law. So if there is no group of people that are pushing for it, raising the issue to the government as an issue of concern, it will not be a priority. So I think if the convention is the solution for the whole dilemma that expats are facing, I think it needs to be brought up to the government attention, and I'm sure they will consider it. They will look into it.
Thank you, Salman. Very, very interesting and actually very useful. One quick question. Is there anything specific to real estate? I know like foreigners can only own in some specific areas like Pearl and Zigzag Towers, etc. And under civil law systems, like real estates are governed by the law situation of the real estate. But is there anything specific for like a foreigner who owns a property in Qatar when it comes to inheritance?
No, I don't think there is. Still, again, the same issue is the real estate law will apply, the Qatari real estate law. The issue is if you get an enforceable will or a decision, remember, the Ministry of Justice, they will not be able to transfer the asset to any person unless they have a court order, especially if he got deceased. And with expats owning in certain projects, Lusail, Pearl, and other projects, I think a court decision is important. You cannot just show up to the Ministry of Justice with your will and they will enforce it. They will not do it. They will need a court decision. Because the law does not allow them to basically dispose of the assets without a court order or a sale transaction between the related parties.
Okay, but then the Qatari law would override whatever the foreign legislation may say, because it's real estate, no?
Actually, what happens, the Qatari law supersedes in terms of the transfer, the method of transfer, but not the way you decide to devise it. So if you decide to give it to me, they don't have a choice to say, Salman, you're not related to Marwan, then you're not entitled to it. They will need a court order saying, please transfer this asset to X, and they will do it.
Have no doubt this is a very interesting topic, and I think information about it would be very welcome in the larger community as well. My question is, going back to when you said that there is no will, the remaining party has the option of closing the account or keeping the account and getting access to 50%. If they were to choose closing the account, and by what it seems, the procedures will require a fair amount of time and running around and lawyers and court hearings, etc. Where is the spouse going to fund for all that? Is there a legal aid where an expat would be able to get the information, the support at a time of bereavement when the family is already in a crisis and the bank accounts are seized?
So I'll address it in two parts. So the first part, you're talking about what happens if they decide to close the account. And the second part is what happens, how a spouse can live off an organization that can help him if he doesn't have enough money. The first question, remember, when you open the joint account, you will need to assign the percentages of ownership on whatever goes to the account. So when you close the account, you can withdraw. So if you don't have a percentage, they will assume 50% is owned by one of the spouses and the 50 for the other. So you can withdraw your 50% and they will block the other 50%. They will need a court order that will tell them how this will be devised. Now, to your second part regarding what organizations can help, to the extent of my knowledge, there is an organization for women and child protection. It's an NGO. Their goal is to help and protect ladies and kids, minor kids. And I think it will be one of the organizations that can assist. Secondly, is the charities we have in Qatar. Qatar Charity and so on and so forth. All of these institutions, they have programs to assist those of need for money. So you have accessibility to NGOs away from the government to ask for help.
Hi, thank you for this. I was just wondering about advice for couples with mixed nationality. So if you have a husband who only has one nationality and a wife who only has one nationality, do the courts prefer to see a will drafted in the husband's country or a will drafted in the wife's country? Or has there ever been an instance if you have only a will in the wife's country, the court has refused to acknowledge it?
Thank you, Melissa, for the question. I mean, our laws, we are located in the Middle East. We are an Arab traditional country, but our laws do not discriminate. So you will see the laws applicable is the deceased laws. So if the wife passed away, the nationality of the wife laws will apply. If the husband, the nationality of the husband laws will apply. There is no distinction. The law consider them equal and the same. And I think in Rachel's presentation, you will see the sponsorship system, how it did not discriminate between a woman and a man in terms of sponsoring kids.
An expat who is a Muslim, and if he has a will which is not Sharia compliant, but a legally enforceable will in his home country, will that will be enforced in Qatar, or will the Sharia compliant inheritance be enforced in that case?
Okay. I'll go back to Faisal's comment. If it's marriage issue, you can decide and elect Qatar law to apply. However, if it's inheritance-related issue, the local court would not look into the Sharia component. They will only look at your will or the court decision that is issued by your home country, indicating that this will is valid will. They will apply it. They do not have jurisdiction on applying Sharia principles or civil law principles. There is no discretion on that.
Hi, Salman. Thank you very much. Regarding the bank issue, are you saying that when people open an account, you should probably assign to your partner 100%?
What happens if the other partner pass away?
I mean, in terms of to resolve the
no, I'm not suggesting.
That was just an example, the 50%, because a lot of people are saying that. Well, our thought process on this table were that, well, if you're limiting them to 50%, then that's the issue, because when the person is deceased, then the spouse only has access to the 50%, and then the 50% is remaining in the account, and probably that will pay for the bills, etc., etc. But if you give them access to 100%, then obviously the surviving spouse has access to take them, withdraw the money, and to obviously do what is necessary.
That's correct. Okay. But you don't control who passes away. This is one. Two, it doesn't have to be 50%. You can assign it the way you want. Okay. Three, going back to, I think, a gentleman from this side talked about, actually, the lady on that table, she was asking on how you can live off. Now, if you spend the 50% and there is 50% remaining, while the bank will freeze the account, you'll still be able to go back to the court and get an injunction, and the court will allow you to get a stipend, a monthly stipend from that account, so you can live, as long as there is money. But it will be credited or debited on you if your will, the outcome of your will is that somebody else should have gotten that money, you will have to repay it. But the court is flexible, especially spouses and kids, to allow them to be able to spend on a reasonable basis so they can live.
So my last question is, in terms of one of the spouses that dies and leaves debt, like the car debt, will the court force the surviving spouse to pay off the debt, or will the debt be cancelled, or will they, how does it work?
That's actually a good point. And this is the beauty of the system. Debt is personal. You die, it's your debt, it's not mine. But what will happen is, basically, before they devise the estate, the court will pay the debt of the deceased person. So whatever is left over will be given to the survivors. But you, as a surviving spouse, you don't have a liability toward the debt. His wealth has the liability.
I'll thank you one more time for the informative session. Actually, Jason asked the second question I wanted to ask, but the first question is, what happens in cases, because I have a lot of friends who married couples where one person is Qatari and the other person is actually an expat. So what happens, are there any exceptions to the law if the expat and the married couple passes away in Qatar? When it comes to inheritance, whether, well, they're Muslim, but is there any exceptions to that?
Okay. Mark, I don't know if you know that. If we need to create a distinction between a husband and a wife. If the husband is a Qatari, Qatar laws will apply. And if he passed away, Qatar laws will apply. There is no doubt on it. A wife, after a certain period, will be nationalized, will be able to be nationalized. So if she got nationalized, Qatar law will apply, no doubt. If she is non-local and she passed away, her laws will apply. Again, it's related to the deceased person nationality. It is not related to the relationship. Now, I had a question the other day of an expat who was asking me, can they basically, because her husband is Qatari, can they devise the will against the laws? And the answer is simply no. I mean, our system, Sharia principle, they created a system that we don't have to worry about. If I pass away, it's already divided to my parents, my kids, my brothers, my wife, my family. I don't have to worry about that. And it gave me a room to devise 1/3 of my wealth the way I want. So that's why I was surprised when wills became an issue, because for us it never was an issue.
مرحبا، أنا كميت البغدادي من بنك الدوحة، وشكرا على المعلومات القيمة، وأصلا ما كان ببالنا نفكر فيها. بس سؤالي شبيه السؤال مشارك بالخلف كان الحين، إذا اللي فهمته من المحاضرة أنه المقيم يعامل معاملة واحدة سواء هو عربي أو غير عربي، يعني أجنبي، الجناسة الأجنبية الثانية، سواء مسلم أو غير مسلم. فالحين مثلا بالنسبة لي أنا أكون عراقية مسلمة مقيمة في قطر، توفيت، إذا أكون حاطة وصية أكثر من الثلث، أكثر من ثلث تركتي، فتطبق. أنا هذا اللي فهمته، إنه إذا مخالفة لشريعتي أنا مسلمة تطبق هنا، بس يعني كأني أخلص من أي مشكلة ثانية.
أولاً الله يعطيك طول العمر. And I do apologize, I will address it in Arabic because she asked it in Arabic. إذا كان القانون العراقي يسمح فراح تطبق من المحاكم القطرية. إذا كان القانون العراقي يمنع، المحاكم القطرية ما راح تطبقه. دائما الوصية مرتبطة بقانون دولتك. إذا قانون دولتك يسمح لك بإمكانك، إذا ما يسمح ما تستطيعين أن أنت نعم، قانون بلدك هو القانون اللي راح تطبقه المحاكم القطرية.
إذا في وصية تأخذون الوصية تتركون قانون البلد.
لا، هو ما نترك الوصية. شوفي، الوصية لازم تصاغ وفق قانون بلدك. إذا كانت الوصية تخالف قانون بلدك
ما راح يصادقون عليها هناك. يمكن
إذا ما صادقوا عليها أو المحاكم العراقية ما قبلتها، إذا المحاكم القطرية ما راح تطبق.
Just a quick question. So some employers, with regards to benefits allowances, so for example, they provide a life insurance policy in the company. So if they may ask you, how would you like to distribute, for example, your life insurance policy? And if that conflicts with the will that you have in place, will the courts get involved, or is that a way to kind of circumvent the will issue and then deal with the rest of the estate through the will?
I don't think so. Actually, I had the same issue. I had to decide on who would, in the insurance, to decide who would take what. And I basically wrote down as per Qatari laws. Usually when somebody passes away, the insurance will pay it. They will not wait for a court order. So it is enforceable. However, if it was, if I'm the Qatari passed away and I actually devised my insurance policy to my wife, it will be paid to her. But if I didn't have kids, as per Sharia principles, my family has a share in that money. If they challenge it, she will have to, the court will basically divide it again. So in terms of payment, it will be paid. But in terms of how it will be devised, if it's Sharia principle, they will have to comply with it. If it's against the will, I think again, it will be the same issue.
Thank you. I have a question which is a little bit similar. Now, in the event of a dual citizenship marriage, normally what we would do, for instance, back in the EU, is we will have a will drafted in the country of residence, which will be applicable in that country. Now, let's say that there was an incident, you mentioned that a couple passes away. What will happen in this instant? Which countries' laws will then be effectuated? And the second thing is, I assume we're only talking about here assets which is within Qatar.
Okay, so the first question is related to your will back home, and if both spouses pass away, what happens, right? Your will be applicable back home. This is what happens. In terms of Qatar, again, if your surviving family get a court decision or get that will to probate, so the court will say this is a valid will, then bring it to Qatar. They will basically enforce it against the assets that you own in Qatar. I think that answers your second question, right? Yeah, okay.
I have a question. Thank you for this workshop. I have a question. What if the mother is Qatari, husband is non-Qatari, and she has children which are non-Qatari? And those children are quite old. So there is a conflict of law. Like some countries, when you are married, when the children are married, they don't have any share in the pension or at least the pension. But the Qatari woman, she has a pension. So in this case, how this pension will be distributed? It will be dealt in Qatari court, but this children who are married are not living in Qatar, and maybe she has a real estate somewhere else in the other country. What will happen with the real estate outside Qatar, and what will happen with the pension?
The pension, again, she's Qatari. Qatari law will apply to all of her assets. So the pension will be paid to the surviving family. If there are more than one, it will be divided between them based on the Sharia percentages division. As for the assets abroad, again, what the court will do is try and liquidate that asset. If they did not agree as family members who will get what in the assets, the court will basically have an order to liquidate the assets abroad and then divide the money, the proceedings between them based on Sharia principles.
First, thank you a lot for your session. Second, I have two questions. First of all, what if a person is living alone in Qatar and then he has a debt or he owns anything and he passes away? What do you do with the debt or what he owns? And my second question is, what if that person is originally Qatari but has a foreign passport?
Okay. First of all, I'll address the second part first. As per Qatar laws, you are not allowed to have dual nationalities. So if you have a Qatari nationality, you are a Qatari. The law will not consider you non-local. The first question was related to debt, right? Again, if somebody passes away, whatever is left of his wealth will be first paying that debt. Once the debt is settled, then whatever is remaining will be devised. If the wealth is not enough to cover the debt, the family does not have a obligation to pay.
I would like to ask you a question about the guardianship of children. So if you do not need to regulate any assets in Qatar, but you just wish to regulate what will happen to your children in case of the main sponsor of both parents passing away, is there a simpler procedure you can go through?
Actually, there are two ways. One is if you had a will saying that the guardian will be XYZ based on my own laws, it can be enforced. The easiest way, I believe, is having your will presented through your embassy, and they will basically deliver the kids to the guardian. The example I gave, there was an incident where I think two English couple passed away, and they had a kid. Remember, the government does not want responsibility. The kid is not Qatari; it's not their responsibility. So the way that what they've done is they put him in care, and they communicated with the embassy, and the embassy communicated with the family, and they came and took the kid. Now, I do not have detailed information whether the family member who came was basically the guardian or not, but the government, as long as the embassy says yes, they are the relative, the government will basically give back the minor to the relative. So the easiest way is if you have your will done back home.
If you don't have a will?
If you don't have...
Can you make a declaration of some sort here in Qatar and registering?
As long as that declaration is acceptable by your home country laws, you can do that. Remember, the trick is your laws apply. If your laws say you can decide who's the guardian, there is no system. Under our laws, there is a system. I cannot decide for the guardianship to be somebody else than the ones that are stipulated under the law. So If your country gives you the flexibility, you can do that. Does that address your...
So in terms of practice, can you do a declaration here in Qatar saying that I appoint X person to be the guardian and register this declaration through the Qatari system?
Well, there is no registration system first. Secondly, you can do that, but if it's going to be enforced through a court system, the court will still ask you to go back and get a court declaration from your home country. But I think in these situations, the embassy, if you have your own declaration done back home, have a copy attested in Doha. This is what I would advise. Have a copy with you. And if something happens, this copy can be delivered to the embassy, and the embassy can communicate with the government.
Just one further clarification on the point you mentioned earlier, where there is no will. The surviving spouse can access 50% of the bank account. Is that if the spouse is a joint owner of the account, or regardless of that?
Yes, this rule applies in terms of joint accounts only.
And if the spouse is not a joint account holder, what are they left with?
It will be frozen. Again, you will still be able to file an injunction to the court requesting a certain amount of money to be paid to you from that account, so you can make your living. So there is a way. If the account is frozen, there is a way to get that decision. And when I say an injunction, it doesn't take very long. You can file it today and get a decision in 2 days, if I'm not mistaken, Hussam, right? Or 3 days. So it doesn't take it doesn't need hearings or a long process. Thank you very much, and I hope this was informative to you all. Thank you very much.